previous video on pride, vainglory or vanity was described as pride's pitiful little sister. Both distress its likeness to pride and its difference from pride. How is vanity so different from pride that it merits a place all its own in the seven deadly sins? Welcome to Thinking Wisely with Dr. Isley, where we learn to live wisely by thinking wisely. What is the distinction between pride and vanity? Well, I could cite a scholar to begin with, and I will later, but let's start with that most distinguished philosopher of all, Mary Bennett, in chapter 5 of Jane Austen's novel Pride and Prejudice. The family is discussing the standoffish behavior of Mr. Darcy when Mary throws in this philosophical tidbit. Vanity and pride are different things, though the words are often used synonymously. A person may be proud without being vain. Pride relates more to our opinion of ourselves, vanity to what we would have others think of us. Of course, Mary is not a philosopher, but the quotation reveals two things about Jane Austen. First, she read and clearly understood some works of moral philosophy. Second, as a great novelist, she delivers a delicious piece of irony. Mary's quotation about vanity shows how vain she is in her desire to be recognized for what she believes are her intellectual attainments. However, the contrast is valid. Pride points to our opinion of ourselves. Vanity desires that others think highly of us. I'll quote now from Rebecca DeYoung's excellent study, Glittering Vices, page 60. She defines vainglory as, quote, the excessive and disordered desire for recognition and approval from others, end quote. Excessive simply means that one can hunger for praise too much. Disordered means that one can want to be praised by the wrong person for the wrong reasons. But please note that both excessive and disordered imply that there is a proper human desire to be praised and well thought of. At its worst, pride despises others and does not care what they think. In contrast, vainglory or vanity desperately seeks, even demands, the approval of others. In the previous video, pride was defined as an exaggerated sense of one's importance and accomplishments. As such, it was designated as a sin against the truth, a false conception. On the other hand, vanity, while also characterized by false conceptions, is a disordered desire, a sin against love. Thus, the two types of sins are related but fundamentally distinct. It also means that the sin of vanity gives us insight into how the truths of the Christian faith both relate to and enable us to obey the two great commandments to love. Those truths can also help us to fulfill our deepest hope. Jesus warns his disciples against the sin of vainglory in the Sermon on the Mount, found in Matthew chapter 6. His general warning is beware of practicing your piety before men in order to be seen by them. Acts of piety mentioned explicitly by Jesus in this passage are the giving of alms, praying, and fasting. The motivation for the desire to be seen by men is that they may be praised by men. Jesus does not criticize these and other acts of piety in and of themselves, but rather the wrong motivation that causes the act not to be pleasing to God. Those who perform these pious acts out of a desire to please men win their favor, which is the reward they sought. But they have no reward from God. Why? The problem is that such pious acts are meant to be done primarily for God and not for men. When done for the praise of men, it makes the person a hypocrite, one whose outward action looks to others as if it were done for God. Thus, the hypocrite is one whose external act contradicts his internal motivation and who acts ultimately for himself. In reality, such pious deeds were performed to enhance the doer's reputation and not for God, nor even for the humans that benefited from these acts. This is why they are examples of vanity, and they demonstrate that vanity's relation to others, even to God, is wholly self centered, and blatant pretense. In addition to hypocritical acts of piety, the fantasies we create in our minds often reveal our vanity. Writing to monks in the 4th century, Evagrius captures well the dreams of a vain monk. Quote, it raises up a fantasy of demons shouting and women being healed, and a crowd of people wanting to touch the monk's clothes. It prophesies priesthood for him and sets the stage with people thronging to his door, calling for him. And even though he resists, he will be carried under constraint. Practicos, chapter 13. Substitute imagining the crowds praising you for hitting the winning shot in the NCAA basketball championship game or saving someone from a burning building, and you get the idea. Personally, I become so ridiculous that I get weepy thinking about all the wonderful things people will say about me at my funeral. There is something pathetic about the vain person. He is weak because he is dependent upon the praise of others to feel good about himself. He does not have a strong sense of self worth, and his perspective on his own value fluctuates in relation to the praise of others. He enjoys no stable peace of mind, but is constantly threatened by the loss of human approval. Picture for yourself the person eagerly or desperately waiting to see how many likes his Facebook post received or this YouTube video. Worse, dependence on the praise of others makes it impossible for him to do good in the face of opposition and can lead him to do evil. The word vanity is clearly related to the rather old fashioned word vainglory. But vainglory signals two additional problems with the sin of vanity. First, vanity seeks its own glory, not God's nor other people's. Second, the vain person has dedicated himself to nothings. In doing so, vainglory misses both aspects of the chief end or purpose of man, according to the Westminster Shorter Catechism, to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. The Latin word vanus, from which vanity is derived, means empty, that which contains nothing. Made famous in the English translation of Ecclesiastes 1 2. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. It is used to describe the emptiness and futility of life without God. Therefore, vanity is a striving after the wind, verse 14, a pointless dedication to nothings. As Jesus points out, the vain person desires earthly treasures that will not last. The externals of life, possessions, as well as the praise of men, are subject to corruption and theft. Verse 6, chapter 6:19 of Matthew. One pours oneself out on nothings, and the self becomes empty. John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress reveals the nothingness of the things that vanity pursues. In that allegory, Christian and faithful must pass through the town of Vanity Fair. When called to buy the items for sale, they put their fingers in their ears and cry, turn my eyes from beholding vanity and look upwards, signifying that their trade and traffic were in heaven. When asked what they will buy, they reply, we buy the truth. So then, vanity too, like pride, is a sin against the truth. What then is the truth that vanity does not see? Biblical faith believes that we have been made in the image of God, Genesis 1 26 and 7. Knowing through faith that we are creatures made in the image of God, we realize that our full humanity exists in relation to God. Our true self is of greater value than the things the vain person pursues. In Matthew 6, Jesus asks rhetorically whether life is not more than clothes and food, and whether we are not of more value than the birds of the air. A true grounding of the self is to recognize that we have been created by God in His image. Our value comes from that solid reality. God's image defines us. We need not succumb to vanity's desperate need for human praise, which leads to us being defined by the ever changing and contradictory opinions of others. Nevertheless, it is proper, even good, to take pleasure in praise from a source outside of ourselves. However, the source must be fitting to mankind's nature as the image of God. In other words, we were made not only to praise God, but to be commended and honored by Him. Indeed, according to Psalm 8:5, He has crowned us with glory and honor. Now, we should not praise ourselves, as Proverbs 27:2 counsels. Let another praise you, and not your own mouth, a stranger, and not your own lips. Nor should our primary motivation for acting rightly be to receive praise. We should do that which is right, just, and good because it is right, just, and good. However, we are social animals. Good relationships are essential to a good life. So there is no reason to deny that it is gratifying to be praised by others. We just should not allow the pleasure of being praised by others to guide our thoughts and actions. In fact, recognizing that praise for good acts is gratifying and a motivation for doing right, we ought to be praising one another. When children are praised for doing good by their parents, their character is shaped to do the good. Perhaps the clearest positive biblical example of praising someone else is found in Proverbs 31, verses 28 to 31. The conclusion of the description of the virtuous woman is telling. Quote, her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. End quote. The praising of another for doing what is right not only encourages good behavior, it also is one way of loving them. The habit of speaking encouraging words to others helps to correct vanity's nature as a sin against love. The two great love commandments make this clear. As those who are to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, we naturally desire to please Him. For this reason, one of the deepest Christian hopes is that he or she will hear on the final day the words of his Lord, well done, good and faithful servant. Matthew 25:21. In Works of Love, Soren Kierkegaard famously wrote, Christianity teaches that love is a relationship of man, God, man. That is, that God is the middle term. In our view of ourselves, God is the middle term as well. We must view ourselves as God views us and see that we are made in His image. Therefore, when we love God, we also begin to love ourselves through God as His image. The result is that then we love our neighbors as ourselves. John Calvin wrote in the Institutes of the Christian Religion, Book 3, Chapter 7, Section 6, we are not to look to what men in themselves deserve, but to attend to the image of God which exists in all, and to which we owe all honor and love. As we consider the image of God in our neighbors, its beauty and dignity allure us to love and embrace them. Thus we love them as the image of God, whom we love. Our knowledge of the honor we have from God as His image frees us from the slavish desire to be praised by others and allows us to praise and love them. Ultimately, the desire to be praised is fulfilled by God's praise. It is a wholesome desire and, directed toward God, has a reliable object, the very opposite of vanity. Its object is not the self, but the one who is the fullness, who is fullness himself, and in him we live and move and have our being. It is reliable because the one in whom it resides will never change, fail, nor forsake us. But we must not forget the other side of Christian truth. In our sin, we have rejected God and placed ourselves at the center of the universe. In our vanity, we seek to be praised by others and use the goods of God's creation to impress others and make ourselves feel worthy. Vanity's quest results in desperation and despair as we seek to mold ourselves in conformity to the desires of other humans and give weight to earthly goods that they cannot bear. Vanity's pursuit of its own glory leads to the loss of loving human relations and the joy that comes from recognizing the beauty of God's creation. The good news is that the God we rejected reached down and humbled himself in the person of Jesus Christ, displaying God's love and offering his forgiveness. Instead of clinging to our artificial self created by vanity, we openly acknowledge our faults and receive God's forgiveness. We are free to love and receive love in our relationships. Furthermore, we recognize that the heavens declare the glory of God and the sky above proclaims his handiwork, and we are free to enjoy it as a display of his beauty and majesty. It would seem that those strangest words of Jesus make sense of everything. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. In the next video in this series on the seven deadly sins, we look at the thoroughly nasty sin of envy. As always, comments are welcome. If you would like to receive these videos automatically, just click on the subscribe button below. Thank you for listening.